Hi everybody, welcome to NYLC's webinar on Introduction to Service Learning. We are happy to have you here today, and hopefully we'll be able to share some knowledge with you about service learning and help you kind of get started or refresh yourself on what service learning is. We're going to jump right in, and it would be great if everyone could introduce themselves today, and you can do that through the chat box, which is on your right. If you could introduce yourself with your name, your organization, what state you're from, and one thing that you're hoping to gain from attending the webinar today. So again, you can do that in the chat box, which is on your right, just so we kind of everyone knows who's on the webinar today, and if you can see people you're familiar with or other people you didn't know who are interested in service learning, so that would be really great. While you guys are doing that, I will introduce myself. My name is Elizabeth Koenig. I am a professional development manager here at NYLC. I've been with the organization for about 5 years, and so I've held a variety of different roles in a variety of our different programs, and I'm excited to lead you through the webinar today. So we have two people introducing themselves, or a couple, now they're coming through. We have Lana and Tiffany, who are both here at NYLC. We have Anne, and she is with AFS Intercultural Programs in Michigan. Mary from Youth of Virginia Speak Out. Oh, we got a lot of people. We have Matthew from People to People International. From someone from Philadelphia, someone from Phoenix. So we have kind of a wide variety of people here today. So I'm going to jump right in, and to get more information about where you're coming from and what knowledge you have with service learning, I'm going to have you guys rate yourself on a scale from 0 to 5 about your experience and knowledge with service learning. So you can use the arrow tool. It is on your top left on the toolbars. It's right to the left of the little text icon. So you can use the arrow to point out where you are in service learning and in your experience and knowledge. So if everyone could do that, that would be great. We have everyone kind of entering it in. So we have some more experienced people, some kind of mid-range people. Everyone's a little all over the place. I think I rated myself kind of in the middle towards the top end, but still knowing that I've been in service learning for a long time, but still know that I have a lot to learn, and I learn something new every time I do a different presentation or talk with a new teacher or a new youth who's experienced in service learning. I always learn something new. So we kind of have people towards the lower end in the 2s and 3s range. So moving on, I want to kind of talk about what we're going to talk about today. So we're really going to talk about the what, why, and the how of service learning. First, what is service learning? We're going to look at the definition of service learning as well as what makes service learning high quality. We're going to talk about why service learning and why it's an effective strategy for youth engagement and achievement. And then we're going to talk about how to implement service learning. So just a reminder that this is an introduction to service learning, so hopefully this will give you a good taste of what service learning is and give you a good idea for resources that you can go to learn more about service learning and how NYLC can help. So jumping right in, I first want to give you guys the definition of service learning so that we're all on the same page about what we're talking about. So service learning is an approach to teaching and learning in which students use academic knowledge and skills to address genuine community needs. So I want to go through this definition a little bit and point out some key aspects of it. So first, it is a teaching and learning strategy. So it's both, it engages both the youth and the adult in the experience, and both of them are working together on service learning. The next phrase I want to point out is academic knowledge and skills. So the goals, whether they're academic, character, or leadership goals and skills, those come first, and they're really a main and significant part of the process. And then finally, service learning addresses a genuine community need. And we'll talk about this later when we talk about the K-12 service learning standards for quality practice. But service learning really looks at genuine community needs, something that has been investigated and identified, and something that is needed in the community. So now that we've talked about the definition of service learning, and hopefully we're all on the same page about that, we're going to talk about what makes service learning high quality. In 2008, the service learning field released evidence-based standards and accompanying indicators that K-12 service learning practitioners can use to ensure that high-quality service learning is happening. Through a ton of research and experience, we realized that high-quality service learning was really important, and that's when you got the outcomes that you were really looking for. So then the obvious question is, what is high-quality service learning? So these are the 8 service learning standards that were identified that lead to a high-quality service learning practice. So we're going to run through them really quick, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about each of them. You can also find more out about the K-12 service learning standards for quality practice on the NYLC website, which is nylc.org, as well as on the LIFT, which is a multimedia resource that's really focused just on these 8 standards, and you can find that at lift.nylc.org, LIFT spelled L-I-F-T. So we're going to jump right in to meaningful service, which is the first standard on our list. Meaningful service is really about actively engaging participants in meaningful and personally relevant service activities. This includes making sure they're age and developmentally appropriate, that they're personally relevant, that the students understand the context of the service, and that they can really see attainable and visible outcomes. So this is really making sure that since it's meaningful and relevant, that students are engaged and invested in the process. So next is linked to curriculum, which is about intentionally used as an instructional strategy to meet learning goals and or content standards. So this is a little bit of what we talked about before when talking about the service learning definition, but when we talk about linked curriculum, we really want to make sure that there are clearly articulated learning goals, and it really allows for students to use the knowledge that they're gaining in school or in their program that they're working on and be able to show how it's used in the service learning project. So that's linked to curriculum. Reflection incorporates multiple challenging reflection activities that are ongoing and that prompt deep thinking and analysis about oneself and one's relationship to society. So important things about reflection are that they happen throughout the experience, that they use multiple intelligences so that students have the opportunity to express their reflection in multiple ways, that they really use deep thinking and they're not just surface level reflections, and they also really examine the preconceptions and presumptions that students might have about the community need or the issue that they're addressing, and they understand the connection between what they're learning and what they're serving. So reflection is really a huge part of service learning, and we'll talk about that more later when we talk about how to do service learning. Next is diversity, and this really promotes an understanding and mutual respect among all participants. Diversity allows students to identify and analyze different points of view, and it really allows students to gain skills and experience in conflict resolution, joint decision making, and being able to recognize and overcome stereotypes. So the next reflection is the next standard is youth voice, and youth voice is a really huge part of the service learning process. As you can probably tell by our name, the National Youth Leadership Council, it really focuses a lot on youth and making sure that youth voice is part of every experience. So youth voice is really about making sure that youth are engaged in the planning, implementing, and evaluation and decision making of the project, and that there's really trust and open exchange of ideas, and that the youth leadership and the youth decision making really happens with adults. It's not only youth, it's not only adults making the decisions, it's really about them making the decisions together. So next is partnership. So partnerships are collaborative, mutually beneficial, and address real community needs. I think one thing to talk about that's really important with partnerships is that they're reciprocal, that both sides are getting something that they need from the relationship. So students have the ability to really talk to the partners that they want to work with and see what the partners need, and that the students are getting that experience. And I see a couple questions that are coming through on the side. This presentation will be available afterwards, and again, it'll be on the Generator School Network, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And then all of these definitions and things are also available on the NYLC website about what service learning is and some of those indicators. So we have 2 more standards left, and then I'll have a quick activity for you guys. So this is progress monitoring, and it engages participants in an ongoing process to assess the quality of implementation and progress towards meeting specific goals, and uses results or improvement and sustainability. So this is really about collecting evidence of your progress. It's a constant eye towards improvement and making sure and checking in that you're on the right track and on the right goal. And another important thing, kind of going back to the idea of making sure that you're engaging your partners, is really to engage your partners in progress monitoring as well, and making sure that they're part of evaluating your programs so you know that they're getting what they need and you guys are working together well to address the community need. And then the last standard is duration and intensity, and this is really making sure that service learning has sufficient duration and intensity to address the community needs and also to meet those outcomes that you addressed at the beginning. So this includes kind of the whole service learning process, which we'll talk about a little later, and making sure that service learning isn't a one-shot deal, but it really happens throughout a course of time, and that it gets drawn back, or that knowledge gets drawn upon a couple of times so that it really gets cemented in students' brains. So those quickly are the 8 service learning standards. So my question to you guys, which you can answer in the chat box on the right again, is which of the K-12 service learning standards do you most connect with and why? So I'll give you a couple seconds. I think I'll kind of talk while you guys are thinking too, but I think the standards are a really good resource to look at when you're looking to strengthen and improve the quality of your service learning and of your service project. So if you're maybe just doing a regular service project and you want to strengthen it and make it more high quality, I think the standards are a great place to go. Maybe you pick 1 or 2 of them to focus on for your next service project that you work on, or the next curriculum that you do, and see how that goes, and keep integrating more and more as you go. I think the service learning standards aren't for all 8 all the time, and it's really the best knowledge that you have on how to integrate them. So Matthew wrote into the chat box that partnerships are something that he connects with, and that they expand the possibility for service, and they really help to identify the community needs. And I think that's a really great point. Youth Voice is also one that's getting brought up, so that's, they have a peer-to-peer program that empowers teens to take responsibility, which is great. It looks like we have a lot from all over the board, so link to curricula, making sure that real-life experiences are being drawn on to drive home those theory and concepts, which I think is a great idea, and really think having students see what's happening in the real world and seeing that their education is helping them today and helping the world today is really great. So thanks, guys, for sharing. These are really great answers, and hopefully this will allow you to reflect and already know how you're going to implement some of these things in your service and in your work soon. So next we're moving on to why is service learning important. So you guys are all here today to talk about service learning, so you obviously recognize why it's important to you or why you need to learn more about it, but service learning is really a strategy that strengthens academic, civic, and character outcomes, and it really taps into the passion, creativity of all young people and allows them to make real change happen. So we're going to talk a little bit today about the research behind service learning, so you guys have some knowledge of what has been found in service learning, and we're going to do that through a couple of trivia questions. So I just opened the poll. It is on the bottom right of your screen, and so we're going to run through a couple questions, and I'll have you guys answer them as we go. So first, students who participate, let me click over to the next one. So students who participate in service learning are more likely to do this as an adult. So A, volunteer, B, vote, or C, go to college. So we have almost everyone voting on the first. We're just doing the first question right now. So we have a couple answers. So the answer to this question is students who participate in service learning are more likely to vote as an adult. And this, you can see where it comes from, where this study comes from at the bottom of your screen. But really, we have found that civic engagement of students has definitely increased as part of service learning, and they're more likely to be a part and be contributing adults and be interested in what's happening in their community. So the next question that I have is that significant outcomes were found for civic knowledge, civic dispositions, and civic engagement when service learning programs lasted this long. So if you guys can scroll down a little bit in your polls, you'll see this question, and if you want to answer that, that would be great. So the options are a semester, a year, or a month. So this really kind of talks about what we were talking about the standards before, the K-12 standards, what duration and intensity means, putting some significant framework around that. So we have a couple people answering a semester. If anyone else has an answer, again, that box is in the bottom right hand of your screen. So the answer to this question is a semester. That research has really found that a service learning project that lasts a semester long is really the height of when those outcomes that we're talking about, those civic outcomes, occur. Anytime it kind of flattens out after that. So if you have a service learning project that lasts a year, they didn't find that significantly more gains happened for a year than they did for a semester. And again, this is kind of just a research study. You might have service learning programs that last a week or a month, or they're a week and it's the whole time you're with them for a week, all 5 days of the week, or maybe it's 1 hour a week for a semester. So it kind of really depends on your project, but it really focuses on making sure that the whole service learning cycle and process has been gone through and that those standards are really met. So it says that they're locked up and they can't vote anymore. So I see that some of you guys can't vote, and if you can't vote, if you want to put your answer in the box, the comment box, we can do it that way as well, just so you can still participate. Thank you for still participating as well. So the next question is, quantitative and qualitative results suggest that providing students with an opportunity to do this related to their civics experience with each other is a powerful component of service learning. So we have a couple answers coming in already. Everyone seems to have it. You're right, it's reflection. And so reflection is really important in the service learning experience, like we talked about before, and the studies have really found that reflection does have a really strong impact about in the service learning experience. And so one last question. Students who engaged in this type of service showed the highest levels of academic engagement over a 2-year evaluation study. So this is direct, indirect, and advocacy. So those are the three types of service that NYLC talks about when we talk about service learning. So I can give you a quick overview of what those each mean. Direct service is really that hands-on direct service to the community solving an immediate problem. Indirect is really more service that looks at the root causes of issues and really looks at addressing those root causes. And then finally, advocacy is really focusing on changing policies and procedures around the problem. So I have a lot of direct answers, but actually it is indirect, and that indirect service, while all of these three types of service are part of service learning and different people do them, it's really the indirect service that's in addressing root causes of the issues and helping students understand those root causes and brainstorm about what those solutions may be that are really important. So thanks, guys, for participating. Hopefully this gave you a little bit of background about why service learning is important and what service learning can accomplish. And again, you'll be able to see the slides posted in the Generator School Network, and you can kind of call upon those studies if you want more information. And NYLC's website also has a lot of information about service learning research. So next we're going to talk about the how of service learning. So I'm going to run through the four-step process that NYLC uses for designing service learning curriculum, and then we're going to do that really quickly, and then we're going to come back to the third step, which is really the designing of the student experience or the learner's experience. But if you want more information about this four-step process, we have some recorded webinars that have been done previously on the Generator School Network. And it's under the topic of creating service learning model units. So make sure to refer back to that. Hopefully this will give you a little quick taste of what it's about, but there's definitely some more in-depth resources on the Generator School Network. So first step in the process is really identifying desired results. And if you're an educator, you might be familiar with this model. This is the understanding by design process, kind of augmented for service learning. So the first step of the process is really identifying desired results. So what youth are going to learn as part of this experience. These results could be specific academic content standards, or they could be civic, character, or leadership skills that you really want the students to develop as part of your program. This step is really important, so by laying out the goals at the beginning, it helps keep everyone on track and working towards the same goals. So the next part of the service learning process is determining acceptable evidence. So this is really designing those assessments with your youth to determine how they will prove their learning. So this could look a variety of different ways. This can be integrated into the reflection. It could be a presentation that they do, could be a test that they take, but really figuring out what those assessments are so that you know that those results that you wanted from the first step are really happening, and doing those before any of the action starts. So then the next step is planning learning activities. We also refer to this as IPARD, and we'll touch back on this in a second. And this is really where students investigate, plan, act, reflect, and demonstrate their knowledge. So we'll come back to this and go more in depth on it in a second. But then the final aspect of this service learning process is the self-assessment. And we talk a lot about youth reflecting and youth thinking about what they're doing and monitoring their progress, but also as a practitioner of service learning and as a leader of youth, we want to make sure that you're also reflecting on your progress and assessing what went well and what didn't go well and what might change in the future. So jumping back to the planning of the learning activities, which is where a lot of the action and the work that the students are doing is housed. So again, this is kind of a graphic to show what IPARD is and what it stands for. So again, it's investigate, plan, act, reflect, and demonstrate. And it really does go in a circle, and we kind of see this as a constant flow that as soon as you've finished with one project, that students are excited and want to move into the next project and go through the cycle again. So IPARD represents the student-centered inquiry model in a service learning project, and so this is really where the student activities are housed. So we're going to start out by talking a little bit about investigation. So through research and inquiry, students and partners identify genuine community needs and its root causes. So this really goes back to a lot of the standards that we talked about, so that students and adults are working together and students and partners are working together to identify those genuine community needs. And then it's also looking at those root causes, so it's can often be an indirect service to the community. So an example of indirect that we talk about a lot is, not necessarily just picking up garbage in the park, which is a great example of direct service, but kind of thinking about why the trash was there to begin with and really identifying those causes and seeing if you can fix those. So that's where investigation happens. So next is planning and preparation. So based on the initial research that the students did, they identify a realistic and meaningful service project with clear goals, timelines, roles, and follow-up. So this is also part of that pre-service section of the cycle. And this is really where all the planning happens for students. And then next we move on to the action section of it. So project participants implement the plan through direct, indirect, or advocacy-based service, and then throughout the ACT, participants collect evidence of their project and of their impact. So one thing really to notice about this section of the service learning process is that it's really the smallest chunk. So there's tons of pre-service that are happening with the investigation and the planning and preparation, and then there's post-service happening a lot too, but then the ACT is really the smallest part. So we think it's really important to prepare students for service and that they're ready to implement, and that they do a really good job at reflecting and demonstrating what they've done. And ACT is definitely a part of the pie, but it's definitely a smaller part. It shouldn't be the main focus of the whole process. So next is reflection. So as you can see, a lot of times reflection does happen in the post-service aspect of this process, but it really does also happen throughout, as you can see with the little hashed lines. That it happens in pre-service, during service, and in post-service. So again, kind of thinking back to the standards that we talked about, that reflection should be cognitively challenging, it should be implemented throughout the service learning cycle, and it should really help students recognize the connection between what they're learning and then the action that's being taken or that happened. So then the final step in the IPARD model is demonstrate, and this is really where students showcase the learning and the community impact to stakeholders and supporters. And this is also where they make recommendations for the future, and how we talked about at the beginning that this circle is continuous and that the arrows keep going around. So this is maybe where they come up with those ideas of what's going to happen in the future and what they want to do again. And so again, thinking back to that 4-step process that I briefly went over, this is where some of those assessments happen. So when students have the ability to kind of show what they've learned and prove to you what they've learned and the skills that they've gained. So that was kind of a quick flyby overview of the IPARD model. So this is kind of the end. We talked about why service learning and what service learning is, and we talked about the definition and the standards. And then we did a quick overview of how service learning happens. So my question back to you is, what is your next step? So I just wanted to have you guys take a minute to reflect and then share through the chat box about what your next step is, and maybe something new that you've learned today that you're excited to implement or to learn more about in the future. So I will give you a few seconds to do that. So we'll have you talk about your next step, and then we'll also have time for questions if you have questions as well that I can answer for you. But we'll talk about next steps. So I'll give you guys a few seconds to answer that. So Michael's really excited about the IPARD model and seeing how he can incorporate that into the existing program that they're already doing. seems like people are thinking